Okay guys, welcome to the chapter of the peripheral nervous system. In reality, we have already kind of touched on some of the things that I'm going to present today to you, but we're going to spell them out a little bit more in detail. So first of all, we have to look at the organization of the peripheral nervous system in more detail. We have to have this diagram very well established in our mind. And remember one thing, the central nervous system and of course the peripheral nervous system are in tight communication. And when we talk about peripheral nervous system, PNS, this consists mostly in cranial nerves and spinal nerves. We're going to see that there are some details as well that we're going to learn today of how these nerves are organized. Okay, so we're going to recognize a few more structures in there, but they're still part of really especially the spinal nerves. We're going to learn about the 12 cranial nerves, and we're going to learn their names and their functions. So regarding the peripheral nervous system, we can divide this system into two divisions. One is going to be your afferent or sensory division. The other one is going to be your efferent or motor division. And when we talk about these two divisions, we have to also make another distinction within these two divisions. The afferent or sensory division contains both somatic sensory and visceral sensory divisions. And within these two, we also have to make a distinction because there are some somatic sensory functions that are special. We recognize them as special, and we're going to talk about this in a couple of lectures from now. So there is the general somatic sensory, which is your sensory pathway that transports signals of touch, pain, pressure, vibration, temperature, sensation you have in your skin, limbs. And your special consists in the sensory information from hearing, the equilibrium, and the vision. Then you have your visceral sensory division, which again has a as a general division and a special one. Your special one in this case is all the information about taste and smell. Okay, so taste and smell are special visceral sensory divisions of the afferent pathway. The general here refers to the signals of stretch, pain, temperature, and things like irritation in your internal organs that would cause like nausea, also hunger, things like that. Okay, this was your afferent or sensory division. Now we're going to look at the efferent or motor division, okay, which also has a somatic and visceral subdivision. And your somatic, this is very simple because your somatic motor efferent division is just refers just the innervation of the skeletal muscle. This is all the voluntary. This refers to all the voluntary movements that you do with your body. The visceral motor, which is also recognized as autonomic nervous system, which is acronymized as ANS. Remember, this one we already kind of touched on it as well. Can also be subdivided. It's really a system that we recognize there. We can subdivide it in parasympathetic and sympathetic, which we kind of already also touched on. And this refers to the general innervation of smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, okay? So this is your autonomic nervous system, ANS. We're going to dedicate some more time talking about this very, very important subdivision of the efferent motor division. Okay, so try to schematize this without looking at the slide. Try to have this schematic subdivision of your peripheral nervous system in mind. Try to draw it on your own. So that would be the proof that you really know all this. This is very, very fundamental to know. All right, so now, as we already stated, the peripheral nervous system is made of mainly of cranial nerves and spinal nerves, but we will also see how within the spinal nerves we can recognize other structures such as ganglia. We're going to talk about them today. And also we're going to talk about how spinal nerves can actually, how they're organized to form specific structures that we recognize and name in a certain way. Okay, so regarding a nerve, okay, we have to understand what is the structure of a nerve. When we say nerve, what do we really refer to? You know that, of course, this is not really well designed, but of course, when we talk about a nerve cell, okay, we recognize the cell body or soma that has the nucleus, dendrites. This is your multipolar type of nerve, okay, and we recognize an axon, okay. The axon, which is the very long structure, conductive structure, conducts action potential, is only one per cell. And when we talk about nerve, we talk about a bundle of these axons together. They bundle together to form these very thick bundles of cell processes, basically axons. And when we zoom in, okay, so imagine you have this bundle, it resembles like a sausage, okay? You could cut it and you could look at a section just like you would cut your sausage and you see what's inside, okay? If we do that and we're looking at that situation here, we'll see how we can recognize now the organization of these bundles, how they're bundled together. Some of these nerves, these cable-like bundles of axons can be very long. The longest of the nerve in the human body is the sciatic nerve. We're going to look at it today. Okay, so let's take a look at the organization of the axons within a nerve. And you will recognize here some terminology pretty much that we have already encountered. If you keep in mind the meaning of those prefixes that we have or suffixes that we have already talked about, especially for the muscle system, then should be very easy for you to remember and understand this organization. So the axons are bundled together in bundles that are delimited by a specific type of membrane of connective tissue, and these bundles are known as fascicles, okay? The same exact name that we gave to those to the organization of muscle cells, okay? So there are fascicles here as well, but we refer to them here as a bundle of axons, okay? Why do we group them? We group them because they are grouped, wrapped by a layer of connective tissue known as perinerium, okay? You had in the muscle tissue, you had the perimysium, remember? Here you have the perinerium, all right? So bundles of axons are bundled together by the perinerium, and this is known as fascicle. And that's not just that's not it. There is more to the organization of a nerve, because a nerve has several fascicles in it, so it makes it really thick. Okay, and so this is an entire nerve, a section of an entire nerve, and you see how you can recognize several fascicles in it. And in between fascicles, there are blood vessels that run, okay, parallel to the fascicles, as is shown here. And the other thing that we have to recognize are membranes that surround the entire nerve, okay? And what do we call a membrane that's outside, that defines the whole structure, is on top? We call it epinerium, okay? Just like we recognize the epimysium. And the other membrane that we have to recognize is the endonerium. So it turns out that each axon, okay, besides the myelin sheath, also has a membrane of connective tissue that defines it, covers it, protects it, and that's known as endonerium. Okay, so endonerium, perinerium, and epinerium are these three layers of connective tissue that define axon, fascicles, and the entire nerve. And so this is very important. This is organization of a nerve, structure of a nerve. You must know this extremely well for me. And this is a real picture. This is a three-dimensional electron microscopy that shows you really how myelin can shows you the myelin sheets here. You see how you see it very well here, all the myelin sheet that covers all axons of neurons. Is a section of a nerve. It's beautiful. And when we look at the histology, okay, if you look at something like it looks like a slice of soppressata, that's your nerve, okay? F are fascicles here. These are all your fascicles, okay? These are the various bundles of nerves, okay? And these various bundles of nerves are delimited by the perinerium. P is the perinerium that defines them, okay? And then the whole structure here, the whole nerve is delimited by the epinerium, okay, E. And then you cannot really appreciate here, but each, you would have to zoom in much more, like in some magnification like this one, to appreciate the endoneria or endonerium of all the various, there are some here that are highlighted, the various axons, okay? So remember your slice of soppressata. Remember, this could be one of the pictures that I show you in a test or in a lab practical. Okay, nerve histology. All right, now we're going to talk about the spinal nerves, the organization of spinal nerves. And we have already kind of touched on this, if you remember. We have numbered them. Remember, there are 31 total nerves. And try to remember this number for me. And of course, they're spread all throughout the spine, basically. And as we name the various regions of the spine, so we name the nerves that belong there. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. You have your cervical nerves, you have your thoracic nerves, you have your lumbar nerves, your sacral nerves, and coccygeal nerve, which is only one. And of course, they're paired. They're on the left and the right. So we talk about, when I say there are 8, 12, 5 in each region, of course, we're talking about pairs here, okay? And I will see how, at the exception of the thoracic nerves, all these are in these areas, nerves form very complicated, complex, and intricate structures. We'll see how we call them in a minute here. All right, so try to remember the total number of spinal nerves for me. And I'm not going to go into the detail to ask you how many nerves are per area, but at least you have to know the various areas. So there are cervical, there are thoracic, there are lumbar nerves, there are sacral nerves, and coccygeal nerves. Okay. Now let's take a look again, and this is a repetition, okay? But I think we have to define things a little bit better. Of spinal nerves. In this representation here, I just want to highlight the afferent transmission and the efferent transmission. The one thing I want you to start remembering for me from this picture is that the afferent transmission is posterior or dorsal, okay? It's a dorsal route here, whereas the efferent transmission is ventral, okay, or anterior. This is your anterior or ventral portion of the body. This is your posterior, okay, or dorsal as well. It's fine to define it both ways, okay? So that's all I want you to start understanding, okay? And here, this is a little bit of a biased picture because it's showing you just the somatic. So it's showing you a afferent transmission of a signal that may come from the skin, an efferent transmission of a signal that goes to skeletal muscle. This is somatic. It's not the whole story there, okay? There isn't just the somatic pathway to be considered, okay? So again, in this particular slide, I just want you to start focusing and remembering about the posterior or dorsal and anterior, posterior being afferent and anterior being efferent, meaning that this is sensory, right? Remember, afferent is synonym of sensory and efferent is synonym of motor. I'm not going to spell out always this extra terminology. You should already know at this point that afferent is sensory and efferent is motor. So I'm using this terminology interchangeably now. Okay, so as I told you, there is more to it, because when we zoom in and we look at these nerves and these nerve bundles here of the dorsal or sensory root and the ventral or motor root, okay, of a spinal nerve, we will see how the dorsal root, the sensory one, not only contains the somatic sensory neurons, but also the visceral sensory neurons, okay? So the autonomic ones. And likewise, also the ventral root, which is the motor root, contains not only the somatic motor neurons, but also the visceral motor neurons, okay? So they all converge together, but they stay parallel to one another, okay? But they're kind of bundled together, okay? In one bundle here. They stay parallel and separated, but they run together into the same nerve root, okay? And as you have noticed, we already named these as roots. So when a nerve bundle comes out from your spinal cord here, which is part of the central nervous system. Here you are in the CNS, right? We recognize this as central nervous system. Here you are on the peripheral. So As the nerve comes out, we call these sections of the nerve, which are posterior and anterior, we call them roots, okay? These are roots. And these two eventually converge into one bundle, which is your spinal nerve, okay? So the roots converge into the nerve. And you may notice already that there is a little bump here. What is this? Okay, what do we call it? And we have already seen many pictures, but I'm going to talk about this in detail in a minute here. This is your dorsal root ganglion. And I want to also point out that all these neurons here that form your dorsal root, they're pseudo-unipolar neurons. You see how they have the soma that then has one axon that splits basically in two. Okay, one is going to be your afferent axon, basically, and the other one is going to be your efferent one. And so, okay, now, of course, when you have nerve bundles, these nerve bundles are axons that are the processes of cells. So you must have a cell body somewhere to which these axons belong. And as we will see, so regarding the ventral root, all the cell bodies are pretty much in the gray matter, of the spinal cord, whereas regarding the afferent pathway, this pathway, many of the cell bodies are present in this ganglion that we're going to talk about, okay? And then within the gray matter here of the central nervous system, we recognize also cell bodies, but these are the cell bodies of interneurons, neurons that put in communication the afferent root and the efferent root. Okay, so these would be like the ones in blue as well as the ones in red, and the blue ones are the ones for the somatic pathway, and the green ones here are the ones of the visceral division. Okay, and so here in this other representation, it shows you a map, basically. SS, VS, VM, SM, what does it stay for? Somatic sensory, visceral sensory, visceral motor, somatic motor. Okay, that's what it stands for. Now I want to mention how we define specific areas of the skin that are supplied by a specific afferent nerve fiber or nerve fibers. So these nerve fibers that constitute the somatic sensory division, they innervate a specific areas of the skin, and these are known as dermatomes. Okay, this is just a definition. We can recognize areas, okay, and we kind of like we can map these areas. It has been mapped, okay, and all the areas have specific referments, okay. But you don't have to know all this, you just have to know the definition of dermatome. All right, and now I want to talk about ganglia, okay? What are ganglia? We have seen them in many pictures already, but we haven't really defined them precisely. Ganglia are ovoid structures containing cell bodies of neurons, okay? As we have seen for the spinal ganglion of the dorsal root just a minute ago. And but these are not the only ganglia that we find in peripheral nervous system. There are several types of ganglia that we're going to recognize right now. So and so we have looked at the spinal ganglion so far, which is that little bump of the dorsal root, the afferent pathway that contains the cell bodies. This one basically, okay? This is your spinal ganglion, okay? You see how it contains the cell bodies of neurons, okay? It's an ovoid structure. And again, we're gonna zoom into it right now. So obviously, in the previous picture that I showed you was a schematic representation showing you just a couple of neurons, but that's not the whole story, right? Because we know that a nerve has numerous axons that are bundled together. It's a complex structure, okay, spinal nerve. So, and therefore there are many cell bodies in a ganglion as shown here, okay? And so this is again the posterior or dorsal root, okay, is your sensory pathway, and it contains this ovoid structure which contains the cell bodies of the sensory neurons, of the all the sensory neurons, neurons that are involved in the sensory pathway, in collecting information basically from your skeletal muscle, skin, or also other organs, okay? Now, the other ganglia that we're going to talk about, okay, they are the autonomic ganglia. And so that's already telling you that are part of the autonomic nervous system that we have mentioned. Okay, we're going to talk more in detail about the autonomic nervous system actually next time we see each other. But for now, we're going to define these ganglia. And there are two sets of ganglia that belong to the autonomic nervous system. One are the paravertebral ganglia. Paravertebral means that they are parallel to the vertebral column, okay? And there are a set of ganglia. This is just a schematic representation. I'll show you a better picture, more comprehensive, in the next slide. These actually go pretty much span the whole length of the spinal cord, from the lower cervical area to the sacrum, basically. And they are, of course, they are present on the left and on the right as well. Here they're just schematically represented on one side. But these run parallel, again, these run all parallel to the spinal cord, and they are called altogether sympathetic trunk. They form the sympathetic trunk, okay? A set of ganglia that run parallel to the spine, the spinal cord, are known as paravertebral ganglia, and altogether recognized as a sympathetic trunk, okay? The other ganglia, so these were the paravertebral. The other ones that we're going to recognize are the prevertebral ganglia. Don't get confused between para and pre. These are also known as collateral ganglia, or for instance pre-aortic ganglia. Again, they're sympathetic ganglia, but they lie between the paravertebral ganglia and the target organ. For instance, this could be a blood vessel, and you see how they are positioned in between that target organ and your paravertebral ganglia. They're right here, okay? They're in between. So they're prevertebral, if you will. And these consist in specific ganglia that we can name already. There are the celiac ganglia, the aortic renal ganglia, and the superior and inferior mesenteric ganglia. Okay, you kind of have to remember these names for me. I know it's a lot, but this is what it is. Okay. All right, so we looked at the spinal ganglia, okay, which are these ones. These are easy. And we looked at the autonomic ganglia. We named them, and we kind of visualize where they're positioned. This is a very schematic picture, but if you want to look more at a more realistic drawing, okay, this is your sympathetic trunk. Of course, you have one on the right and one on the left, and these are all the ganglia here. These are ovoid structures that contain cell bodies of neurons. Okay, see how they run all parallel on left and right. Okay, this is your trunk. All together, this is your sympathetic trunks. But if you want to kind of define them as single structures, you will call them a paravertebral ganglia. Okay? And then you have your prevertebral or pre-aortic ganglia. Okay? And they are all pretty much grouped in one region over here. And see, there is an aorta here. That's a big aorta. That's why they're called pre-aortic ganglia as well, because they come before. They're kind of like outside the aorta. And these are your celiac ganglia, superior mesenteric ganglia. Okay, they're all grouped here. And in inferior and superior mesenteric ganglia. Okay. And so they're all grouped here, your prevertebral ganglia. This is all we have talked about. I'm just having you visualize them more in place, okay? I may give you a picture like this, especially in the lab practical, to recognize, okay? You need to know this for me. All right, so now I want to go a little bit more in detail looking at these spinal nerves, okay? And I want you to appreciate and understand how here, basically, they're all interconnected vertically with one another, okay? There is communication here. Everything communicates with everything. That's always the case with in general. But that's one thing that you have to remember about the nervous system. Everything communicates with everything. Okay. And so when we look at a spinal nerve, okay, we already recognize we already recognize the roots. The roots are the two bundles. Of course, there is the dorsal and the ventral. Bundles of axons, of course, that immediately come out from the central nervous system, from your spinal cord, okay? So there are the roots, okay? And the dorsal one has the spinal ganglion or ganglia, if you say plural. Now, these two roots, they converge into a mixed spinal nerve, mixed because it will contain your afferent and efferent pathways or divisions, if you will. But then this mixed spinal nerve, this single bundle here, which will have only one epinerium, right? It splits again, okay, into rami. Ramus or rami means branches, okay? So it goes like, if this is your central, okay, these are the dorsal and ventral, okay? They converge into one and then splits again, okay? And we call these ones roots, and we call this one nerve. The spinal nerve is really this one. And then when it splits again, we recognize this as rami, okay? And of course, it's going to be your dorsal ramus and your ventral or anterior ramus, okay? That's what's shown here, dorsal ramus and ventral ramus, okay? And so when that happens, in reality, what's happening is that all these, remember that here there was your only your sensory here, and this was your motor. They were divided, kind of divided very precisely, your afferent or sensory and your efferent. In reality, when you look at the rami, these are mixed. You see how here you will see the blue represents the sensory, the red represents the motor. Here in the rami, you see both of them. So they kind of like crisscross, and the visceral, I'm sorry, the sensory and motor nerves here, nerve bundles will kind of crisscross, and it becomes a mixed nerve there, okay, when it becomes the ramus or rami. Okay, this is shown also here. Okay, you have to pay attention to the colors here. Okay, and again, you see the blue and the red here only, and then when it becomes a ramus, you see blue and red in the same ramus. Now, okay, so we talk about the roots, we talk about the mixed nerve, and we talked about the dorsal and ventral rami. But we have to talk about also other rami here, which are the gray and white rami communicantes, or if you say it in singular, it will be ramus communicans. And these are, and they're represented here, okay? So the gray and white ramus communicantes, these are branches, okay? They branch out from the anterior ramus, and they're communicantes or communicants because they put in communication your sympathetic trunk, all the ganglia of the sympathetic trunk, with your anterior ramus of your spinal nerve. Okay, so spinal nerves are in tight communication, in direct communication with the sympathetic trunk, okay, through your white and gray rami communicantes. This is extremely important. You cannot miss from knowing this, because otherwise you wouldn't have a big picture in mind where it shows you how everything here is in communication with everything. Okay, your spinal nerves that are also, that contain both visceral, sensory, motor divisions. They're all in communication with your sympathetic trunk as well. And when we talk about rami communicantes, these contain, again, autonomic nerves. They carry, because these are autonomic, we just redefined all the sympathetic trunk, and the sympathetic trunk is a division of the autonomic nervous system. So the rami communicantes are part, pretty much, of the, we say, of the autonomic nervous system, pretty much. Okay, but they put in communication the autonomic nervous system with your spinal nerves. Okay, so it sounds complicated, but once you have a picture in mind, try to draw these things. Okay, try to schematically draw this or this. Okay, I like these schematic representations because they are less busy and hopefully make you visualize what's going on, and then you can go into the busier one once you have you have kind of understood what's going on, and now you can look at busier pictures to, okay, yeah, this is what's really going on. All right. Now, as I told you, spinal nerves, sometimes they form these complex, intricate structures. And actually, we can recognize several of these intricate structures. These are known as plexuses or plexus singular, okay? And we can recognize several, actually at least 4 plexuses. There is the cervical one, there is the brachial one, and then there is the lumbar one and the sacral one. And again, this is just a network of nerves that all communicate with one another. And in general, a nerve plexus is composed of afferent and efferent fibers, so sensory and motor, and which arise from the merging of the anterior ramus of the spinal nerves and blood vessels as well. And the major, I have already named the major plexuses. They should be really plexi, but this is a little bit Americanized. Anyways, the ones that I want you to remember are at least these 4, okay? And we don't recognize any plexus in the thoracic region. As we will see, in the thoracic region, we have nerves that come out, single nerves. They don't form these intricate structures, interconnected structures, okay? And they stay as single bundles, very ordered. And remember, okay, so remember that the nerves that arise from the plexuses have both sensory and motor functions. They're not like, there isn't any net distinction there. They're both types of fibers, nerve fibers. And of course, therefore, the functions include muscle contraction, maintenance of body coordination and control, reaction to sensations like heat and pain, pressure, cold, things like that. Okay, so just want to zoom in a little bit more in detail in the cervical plexus, which serves, of course, each plexus, it's kind of easy to understand what it serves. Of course, when you talk about cervical, this is close to the head, neck, shoulder, so it makes sense that it serves that area. Where the brachial plexus serves the chest, the shoulders, the arms, and hands as well, and it's highlighted here. The ulnar nerve, for instance, is a very important nerve in the brachial plexus, and you see how it starts here and it goes down all the way, okay, to innervate your ulna, but also goes down and to the hand, okay, and it ramifies. Okay, so you want that these nerves reach every portion of the skin and all the muscles there that are there in the area. Then there is the lumbar plexus, of course, and serves the abdomen, the back, the thigh, knees, and this, for instance, contains the femoral, here the femoral nerve, which is very important. And this also, so this was the lumbar plexus, okay? Very long nerves typically. And then there is the sacral plexus. The sacral plexus contains the sciatic nerve, which is actually the longest nerve in your body. Okay, it's shown here how it goes all the way from basically from the sacrum to the tip of your toe. the sciatic nerve. And so the sacral plexus serves the pelvis, the genitals, the thigh, and the feet. Okay, that's why this is contains sciatic nerve that it goes all the way from your sacral area here to the tip of your toe. And so we're talking about plexuses here, and of course there is going to be here there are different colors. They want to highlight the anterior divisions, the posterior divisions, meaning of course the motor, the sensory divisions here. Okay, and there is also the coccygeal plexus, if you will, and this serves a small region over the coccyx. Okay, don't worry too much about this one. The main ones are these four that I have named. And as I told you, regarding the thoracic area, we don't have plexuses, but we have intercostal nerves, which are these ones. They're very straightforward. Okay, I may show you a picture like this. You have to name this. What is this? It's an intercostal nerve. It's very easy. Okay. What is this? This is your sympathetic trunk. Okay, these are the ganglia of the sympathetic trunk that communicate via the rami communicantes over here with your spinal nerves. Okay, and so here are your intercostal nerves that are in the thoracic area. Okay, forming the thoracic spinal nerves. So these will go from T1 to T11. Okay. All right, so now we're going to look at the cranial nerves. The cranial nerves are 12 nerves. We're going to look at them all. And the bad news is that you have to know the names of all of them for me. So 12, they are actually numbered with Roman numbers from 1 through 12. What is the function of cranial nerves? Cranial nerves they can be motor nerves, they can be sensory nerves, or can be a combination of motor and sensory nerves. We will see. We will look at all of them in some detail and see which ones are motor, which ones are sensory, and which ones are a combination. Okay, so there isn't a general rule here, or they're not just motor or sensory or combination. We have to see them one by one, and we can say that all cranial nerves, no matter what, they relay various types of information to and from the body, okay, depending on if they are motor, sensory, or combination of both. And this can be overwhelming, okay, but we're gonna dissect them one by one. Okay, of course, when we say 12, we say 12, but they're 12 pairs, because you have to consider always the left and right. They're all symmetrical, just like your spinal nerves. Okay, they're present on both sides of the body to innervate both sides of the body. All right, so again, there are 12, and we're gonna start with I think we're gonna start with the olfactory one, and then go which is the number 1. So each of them has the precise number. Okay, you can say nerve number 1, or you can say olfactory, or the same thing. Okay, so CN1, okay, cranial nerve 1, olfactory, is responsible for transmitting our sense of smell to the brain. Okay, and so this is sensory, right? And here is your olfactory nerve, okay, and travels from the cerebrum to the olfactory bulb. And of course, the olfactory bulb is the area where smells are analyzed. if you disrupt this nerve, you're gonna lose your sense of smell and the sense, to detect scents. And somehow a disruption of this function on the nerve, this nerve also impairs a lot your sense of taste. Some people that are experiencing hopefully short-term side effects of the virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes COVID-19, are experiencing, in fact, loss of smell and loss of taste. And hopefully this will be a temporary situation. We still don't know exactly if it could be permanent. Okay, so that's all. Then you have your CN2, which is your optic nerve. The optic nerve transmits electrical signals from the retina here, okay, to the eye, to the brain, and the brain transforms the signals, electrical signals, into images, and therefore gives us the information of what we see. Okay. If you disrupt this nerve, there will be, of course, visual impairments, double vision, blindness eventually. All right, so optic nerve is pretty easy to recognize, okay? If I give you a picture that shows an eye and something that connects the eye to the brain, of course, what it's going to be? It's going to be your optic nerve, right? CN2. And CN3 is oculomotor nerve. And of course, this one, if you were to define what kind of nerve this is specifically sensory. Okay, now you have your CN3, which is the oculomotor nerve. This has two main functions. It transmits signals that allow the eye to move in every direction. And secondly, the oculomotor nerve carries also parasympathetic fibers to the iris, which cause, and this parasympathetic pathway causes the iris to constrict whenever there is too much light. And okay, so there is a movement, kind of like a voluntary movement, which is directed by voluntary fibers, and then there are parasympathetic fibers that specifically travel to the iris. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, oculomotor nerve. So you don't control the movement of your iris, the constriction or the relaxation of that muscle that controls the iris, and that's part of your parasympathetic nervous system, involuntary. Cranial nerve 4, which is the trochlear nerve, controls muscle that move the eyeball down and out. You can't really move it too much out, but okay. So for the eye movement of eye, there are several nerves that control that. Has to be kind of like it's one of those organs that is finely regulated, the movement of which is finely regulated. Okay. And so this will be your CN2 shown over here. Okay, see how this is very thick fiber. And this is your CN4 over here, okay? And so it innervates different muscle, okay? And so then you have your CN5, which is your trigeminal nerve, okay? This is a very important nerve, trigeminal. Trigeminal. Why it's called trigeminal? Because it kind of branches out in three main sub branches. Okay, So it's a very, very big, important nerve. It's primarily a sensory nerve, meaning that it relays information, sensation from the face to the brain. Okay, see how it branches out pretty much to the whole face. Okay, but also controls some facial muscles that are important for chewing. And whenever you have a complication of the trigeminal nerve, you could develop trigeminal neuralgia, which is gives you a very important facial pain. We're also, and this, for instance, could be due to a viral infection or mechanical irritation. There are several causes. Sometimes a partial paralysis as well. So the trigeminal, you see here, so such an important nerve. You can try to visualize this branching, and it goes pretty much all over your face. The branches go all over. Okay. Then there is the CN6, which is your abducens nerve, shown here. Okay, this little one over here. Okay. And this controls the muscle that moves the eye away from the nose. Okay, there is so much control of the eye. Okay, so many of these nerves, if you pay attention, they are dedicated to specifically to the movement of the eye. Okay, so this is your abducens nerve. Okay, it controls specifically this muscle, which has been cut here. Okay. And if you have damage of this nerve or some kind of lesion, well, this causes the double vision, okay, that some people may experience, even temporarily. It depends, sometimes there is inflammation and things like that. Okay, so then we're gonna look at the CN7, which is your facial nerve. Okay, and your facial nerve is very complicated because it controls most of the muscles of the face, but also transmit taste signal from the front of the tongue. Okay, it conveys parasympathetic fibers that make the eyes tear and mouth salivate, and it's responsible for also a little bit of sensation around the ear. So it's very complicated. Okay, see, this is a mixed nerve because it controls muscle movement of the face, and it gives also a lot of transmits a lot of sensory information. Okay, thanks to the parasympathetic fibers. Okay, so it's a mixed nerve. It's a very important nerve again. Okay, and that branches out and innervates pretty much the whole face over here. Okay, so CN8, okay, which is a vestibulocochlear nerve. Vestibulocochlear, okay, you will understand this terminology a little bit better when we talk about ear. Okay, is your vestibulocochlear nerve. Okay, showing you how it travels, of course, to the brain from the ear. Okay, and it has two branches, actually, the vestibular branch and the cochlear branch. That's why it's vestibulocochlear. It's almost like it's like two big branches that then converge in one nerve bundle here. And so the cochlear component relays acoustic signals to the brain, okay, so we can hear. And the vestibular branch sends signal regarding the balance and movement. Okay, so there is a structure, so we'll see, that is connected to the ear, basically part of the ear system, that hearing system, that is the vestibulum, and this is actually responsible for maintaining our balance. Okay. And in fact, problems with the vestibulocochlear nerve can not only determine hearing loss, but also vertigo. And vertigo is like kind of like loss of your balance, feeling like out of balance. It's a very, very complex situation. Okay, so the vestibular branch over here and the cochlear branch, they serve the cochlea and the vestibulum. That's why they are called that way. And so regulate not only hearing, but also balance. Okay, so CN9, okay, CN9 is the glossopharyngeal nerve, okay, and the glossopharyngeal nerve has some kind of odd jobs. It's responsible for taste from the back of the tongue, sensation from a small portion of the ear and parts of the tongue and throat, innervation of one important muscle that is involved in swallowing, okay? And salivation by the parotid gland, and receives important information also about blood pressure from some receptors that are located in the carotid, which is one of the main artery, okay? And so see here how there is innervation to the carotid here, okay, body. And so this is your nerve, and it branches out, and again it branches out to the tongue, it branches out to the carotid. So it's kind of like a complex nerve, okay. Some sense of taste is due to this, okay. But I want to say one of the important function is really for swallowing, that you have to remember for me, okay. So this, and remember, so miscellaneous innervation, but also so the two important ones, very specific, are this for swallowing, because of innervation of particular muscle that is involved in that function. And the baroreceptors are receptors of pressure. Baro, it stands for pressure. So it sends a branch to the carotid body, which is this very huge blood vessel that we have here, and to sense the pressure, okay. So these are two important functions that I want you to remember of this nerve. All right, and number 10, vagus nerve. This is a super important nerve, okay? And so this nerve controls the pharynx for swallowing, the larynx for speaking, and so it's a mixed nerve because it controls these motor functions, but also sensation from the pharynx, and also from part of the meninges and portions of the ear as well. So the growth of the vagus nerve detects taste, especially from the throat, but also special signals from baroreceptors, chemoreceptors near the heart, okay? So the vagus nerve releases parasympathetic fibers to the heart, and signals from this nerve will slow the heart's beating, will reduce the frequency of the heart beating. So this is your vagus nerve. Vagus nerve, you cannot have dysfunctions, pretty much are very dangerous, okay, because of its connection with the heart, especially. It's a super important nerve. Typically, dysfunctions on this nerve are could be fatal. Okay, so remember, this is super important, the connection with the heart through parasympathetic fibers, and you know that parasympathetic, it controls your rest and digest, so it slows down rest and digest functions, and so it slows down the heart beat. Okay, you don't want your heart to pump so fast. Okay, there has to be a control. And remember, so this is super important. Okay, the connection to the heart, you have to know it very well for me. But also, of course, other functions. It's a very complex nerve, okay? And so all the sensations and the motor and the sensory functions to the pharynx and the larynx, okay? All right, I think this is it. Oh, sorry, we still have 2 nerves to go. So cranial nerve 11, which is an accessory nerve. It has pretty much a straightforward function, which is to cause contraction of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Remember that muscle that I made you memorize, okay, for me, which is a very typical muscle here in the neck area. And so pretty much this nerve is dedicated to the movement of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. Also, sorry, the trapezius muscle as well, okay? And so it has branches that go to the sternocleidomastoid as well as the trapezius. So all these movements in this area are regulated by this nerve. And so, you know, this cranial nerve 11 is has a very straightforward functions, motor. All right, so number 12, this is the last one, hypoglossal nerve, okay? This is a motor nerve as well that controls all the movement of the tongue. And whenever you have difficulties, I mean, impairment of this dysfunction on this nerve will bring to some difficulty in speaking or moving also food in your mouth, okay? And so here is your hypoglossal nerve that innervates pretty much the muscles that regulate the tongue movement, okay? All right, so we are pretty much, I think this was the last slide. I know that regarding the cranial nerves, it's a little bit tedious. You have to kind of know all the names for me and try to visualize them and what they do. Okay, told you what are the important things to remember for really. I summarize this a lot. It could be much more detail. We could start naming, for instance, all the branches of each nerve. Okay, each nerve may branch out in specific bundles that take specific names. Okay, so look at this, for instance, but I'm not asking you to remember any of that. You just have straightforwardly to remember for me the names of the 12 cranial nerves with their main function. Okay, and some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them are they have mixed functions and they branch out a lot. Okay, so whichever branches out a lot, at least know that whichever has a straightforward function, then especially, for instance, the optic, something like the optic nerve, you have to know very well. Okay, olfactory nerve as well. And so I think that this is not too much to remember after all, because pretty much we have talked about a lot of this already, especially regarding the structure of nerves, spinal nerves. Okay, we already showed you all these slides in one of the previous lectures, so you should already know a lot of this already. Okay. All right, so next time we're gonna go over the efferent division of the peripheral nervous system, and which is the motor division. And then later we're gonna look at the afferent division with all the special senses, and that's gonna be the end of our course here of Anatomy and Physiology 1.